Welcome to the Friday Habit with Benjamin Manley and Mark Labriola II.
The Friday Habit is for creators, entrepreneurs, and agency owners looking for actionable ideas on how to grow their business and be more profitable.
We'll pull from our combined knowledge of over 20 years and interview thought leaders that will inspire you and give you the motivation you need to kick your business into high gear. Buckle up. It's Friday. It's Friday. Who doesn't love Friday? You know, I mean, the reason why this is called the Friday Habit is because there's an energy about Fridays. Now, you could be listening to this on a Monday or a Wednesday, but just remember that feeling that Friday gives you, like the weekend's coming. Maybe I'm going to have a cocktail tonight because I can sleep in tomorrow. Who knows what it is, but you can take that energy with you everywhere you go and have that kind of excitement every day. And so that's why this is called the Friday Habit, because not only do we do a certain business practice on a Friday, but we also practice just staying positive and having a good time. Isn't that right, Ben?
That's right. You got it, Mark.
That's right. Love it. Well, hey, today we have an awesome guest with us, Shawn Khorrami, and he is helping businesses become more profitable and efficient, and we love profitability and efficiency. So, Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I've been really looking forward to being on.
Yeah. So, hey, what Khorrami? Where is that from? Where is your heritage?
Oh wow! Surprisingly enough, I rarely get asked that. It's Iranian.
Let's go! I knew it.
You knew it.
Yes, salam.
Yeah. Salam. Yeah. Yes. I actually immigrated here right after the Iranian Revolution back in '79.
That is exactly my father-in-law's story, and my wife has that exact story. So my father-in-law came here in the late 70s to go to college, and his dad was like, "Don't come back, stay in America." So he went to a disco, met my mother-in-law. They hit it off, had 4 children, and I married one of their daughters. And
fantastic.
Love the culture, and I can always hear that Persian, like a little bit of Persian. Whenever we're out, I'll look at my wife and I'll be like, I'll just say, like, watch me, and I'll say, "Are you from Iran?" And they're like, "How did you know?" And I was like, I heard the THs, like all this stuff. So I got a good ear. So I had that feeling. I was like, hey, I feel like Shawn might be a kindred brother.
Yeah, that's right.
Fasihu balagnistam.
Oh, you sound pretty good. You're doing well.
Yeah. So Shawn, thanks so much for being on the show. I got a question for you. We do these conversation cards here to kind of get to know our guests a little bit, and we all answer these. Ben, I want you to answer this too. Okay, so this is an open-ended question. We have would you rather's, open-ended questions. This one is, what's the worst work mistake you've made?
Oh my.
Wow,
Ben, you go first because I have to pick from all the ones. You probably have less experience with bad mistakes than I do.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I have a minor one. I worked at Little Caesars Pizza as my very first job when I was 14 years old. And we kind of like pizzas would come out, you'd cut them up, and then you'd put the pans in the dish tank. Well, a buddy of mine was at the dish tank washing pans, and I pulled the pan out of the oven, cut the pizza, and then handed him the pan as I was holding onto it with the grippers, and he grabbed the pan, and it was 1,000 degrees. And
no.
Yeah, that was a work mistake. So
it wasn't your worst one, though, right?
Probably not. But my kids listen to the show, so I don't want to.
I think I have one. I don't know. It's not that specific, but I would say it's just a mistake I made a lot when I first started freelancing. Mm-hmm. And it was just I would get so focused on projects that I would not be responsive to customers. And so over and over, I would disappoint customers when I first started freelancing, out of college and stuff. I would just, be in the middle of a project. I'd be so excited about it. All right, cool. We're going to work on it. And then another customer, on a different project or somebody I had worked with before emails me and I don't get back to them for a week or something. And they're like, what's going on? And then, they're ticked off, which I don't blame them because they didn't hear from me. But that was one thing I had to learn the hard way was early on in my career was just how to communicate with people and not drop the ball when you're in the middle of a project.
Way to bring it back to business, Ben.
That's important. well, here, I'll pick one, and if you want, I can give you another one. One time when I first started doing some online marketing, one of the things we did were these email campaigns we would do. This is 20 years ago. And a lot of this stuff was brand new. And so we were sending out thousands and thousands of emails regarding, having a call to action for certain things, trying to sell a service. And one of the vendors that we were using said, "Hey, we should use a different kind of server. We should just pick a domain and use a separate domain. Don't use one of the company ones." "Oh, don't be silly. All our emails are fine. We've done everything." No. You can get blacklisted, blah, blah, blah. No. So we end up doing the email campaign straight through one of the servers of the company. And sure enough, and we a portion of the emails at the time, it was very different back then. So, email your permissions were different, and so a bunch of our email addresses and everything were living on this one server, plus a whole lot of other things on the for the company, and we ended up for 1.5 2 weeks being shut down. We could not communicate in any way. A whole bunch of the company. So I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, that was
and
fun.
Stressful, very stressful.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
Two people complained. Oh, you want another one? Another one was when I decided that I'm smarter than everybody, and so I'm sitting there. I'm very frustrated with the IT guy. This is another company that I had. I'm very frustrated with the IT guy. The IT guy at one point turns to me, and I'm standing with him, and he's the owner of the IT company, and I'm saying, why can't this and the other? And at one point he turns around I said to him, "Hey, look, I'm going to have to get someone else. This is ridiculous." He says, "Oh, no, you can't get rid of me. You need me." And that is about the worst thing you can say to me, that you're indispensable to me. Like, So I turned around right on the spot, fired him. And I had to become the company's IT guy for the time being, which just destroyed my life for a good 2 months. I had no life at all, and I developed an appreciation for people. I did. So.
Oh man, that's awesome.
No.
Well, hey, Shawn, thanks so much for being on our show, and I'm just excited to get to know you a little bit better and kind of learn from you and allow our listeners to kind of hear some of your experiences and for you to share some of your knowledge of doing business for the past multiple decades. So it's interesting. So you said you're from Iran, so or you are you're essentially like you weren't born in America, so you are like I'm
an implant.
You're an implant, and then my question is English your second language? Like when you first moved here, was it like, all right, I got to learn English and do that? Or
it was scary for me.
I mean, because all that, what I love about this story, because my father-in-law has a great story, right? He came here, he could barely speak the language, but he got to work. He just started working. He was working in restaurants and doing all this stuff, and but he just worked hard and applied himself and networked and grew to be very successful. And so what I love about this story is that so many times we feel, I think, as entrepreneurs and business people, that we feel like, oh, somebody else has upper leg because of the family they grew up in or the privilege they had. But a lot of times when we start to dig into these stories, we find that, man, it's people who maybe didn't have as much privilege as other people have had, and they were able to kind of make something of themselves and be successful. And so I wanted to hear that part of your story as far as you coming here, how old were you, and then what kind of stuff did you do?
Yeah, I consider myself much more fortunate than my father, who had to come over here with me and because of me. Because at the time, what they were doing was they were taking a lot of the in Iran. What they would do is recruit young kids and send them out to to the
Military,
war. And they were used as a lot of times as decoys in order to figure out what's going on in the minefields, or to figure out where the enemy is, because the able soldiers would then be able to actually function. So my father, being very frightened of that, and he actually told this story just a few days ago to some people we had at our house. It took us out. I knew yes and no. That's as far as I knew. And at the time, over here, there wasn't very good sentiment about Iranians.
Right. Yeah, we had the whole crisis where they had some Americans kidnapped, right, during the Olympics or something like that.
Yeah, they were holding. They basically took the American embassy hostage. If you watch the movie Argo, that's partially about that. And it's funny, I have a stamp collection that actually, that's a conversation for another time. It shows their perspective of what that was.
Yeah,
by the way.
Interesting. Yeah.
So we move over here. I know yes and no, and I was young. I was in the 6th or 7th grade, but kids are pretty mean. So it was not unusual for people to spit at you, to pick fights with you. It was rough in that way. Because I had zero friends and zero possibility of having friends or anything, and at the same time I knew nothing of the language. And my father, for a pretty long time, what he would do is sit me down after school and actually translate my textbooks for me. These are the things my parents did, which made I don't have that tough a story because of my parents, because of all the buffer they were for all that stuff. But I think you had in a recent show, you guys had, I want to say, Andy Matheson on. And he was talking about how he eventually got into his father's insurance business, but how he never thought he'd ever get into the insurance business. It was just not that interesting at all for him, right?
Yeah.
I was exactly the opposite. I loved my father's business, which was, he had a construction company in Iran. He built buildings and roads, and I loved being on construction sites. I loved all the equipment and everything. All I thought about is, I'm going to be, this is what I want to do when I grow up. When we moved here, my father obviously could not have the same type of business. He had a much more muted business life. But still, I was very interested in, and that's what really actually got me into being doing my own business. It was, my father got a couple of very small income properties, a few units, and because they were so small, it didn't make sense for them to get professional help. So they would manage it themselves. This is my father and his friends. And they were not very good at managing it, and they were having a lot of trouble with it. And so one of the things I did, and this was my first business, was basically sit behind a computer. That was the time when personal computers were first coming in, and I sort of put together this database program that they could use, and it became my first business. It became, I would sell this process to different property owners as a way of managing their properties. But it was a very difficult time at the very beginning. For whatever reason, I was able to learn the language relatively quickly.
Yeah.
But I learned back then, to not let these things get in your way. When people are, strictly against you because of where you're from. It's fine. People discriminated, they are the way they are. But how do you get through that? Because you have to live too, and you have to succeed as well. You have to do it despite those things. So there are a lot of obstacles that present themselves that may not seem fair to you, or may not seem like you deserve it, or anything, a variety of things. And you just have to bust through those things and get through them. And that's part of being successful. And all of us have those stories. All of us have it. I mean, and I'll stop after I tell you this very quick story.
Yeah.
Even after I got into having, being an adult and having, my first real legitimate business, not as a teenager. I had really tough times. There were times, and I've told people this, that I didn't have electricity. I went through, I remember a time, 2 weeks or 3 weeks it was, I didn't have electricity. I had Halloween lanterns that I would light, and that's how I would get around my apartment because I didn't have lights. So things can get tough. Things can get rough, and if you want to succeed, you have to bust through them, and you'll have those challenges.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Tehran, and then when we moved, we moved to LA, and that's where I stayed.
Okay, Tehrangeles.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's probably an interesting, growing up in Los Angeles is probably also toughens you up, I'm sure. Living
not as much as some other places would, but yes.
Yeah. So did you end up going to university or anything like that?
Yeah. So, I think one of you one time, I heard you talk about how formal education wasn't really you weren't into it. I don't know which one it was. Was it Ben?
Probably.
Ben never finished and I never started.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, and I'm not one of those guys who thinks people should go get a formal education to have any credibility because God knows there's so many people who don't. So that wasn't my thing, but I just loved having formal education. I loved the concept of it.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to college, and I got degrees in mathematics, computers, and economics. And this is how much I loved being in school. I think it's because I was lazy in some way, but I loved being in school that I actually stumbled into the economics degree. I ended up taking so many economics courses as electives. It started as electives that I ended up qualifying for a degree.
Oh, wow.
So I did that, and then after that I continued. I got a law degree. I have formal training in marketing, sales, accounting, and mostly
so
just
you're
because
educated.
I just like it. I don't know how much it all means, and I don't know how much of it I remember. Right? Like what is it? You have that super concentrated way of learning. Like how much of it do you remember a year later after you're cramming all this information into your brain, and then half of it doesn't have any application to anything, right?
100%. I always will get really hyper into something and get excited about it, learn all about it, and maybe it's like setting something up or whatever that is, and I'll kind of do that, and then someone will be like, "Oh, hey, how did you like do X, Y, and Z?" And I'm kind of like, I was kind of an expert at it at one point, but then I forgot everything that I taught myself. You know?
Yeah, that's what happens.
So then you had all this education, and then right away, did you kind of just jump into like the corporate world, or did you say, "Hey, I want to like do my own thing after college," or what was your path from there?
The weirdest thing about like when I think back is that I never sat there and said, "Oh, let me see what." My friends would talk to me about jobs and everything, but I never thought about it that way. I never even actually did a resume for myself while I was in college. Funny thing, a couple of months ago, I was talking to my wife about that. I've never done a resume for myself. I've never actually received a W-2 from any company that I didn't own. Yeah, it's weird. And most people I meet at least have that kind of education, and it brings you a lot of stuff. When you go and get a job, work for someone, you get a completely different perspective, an entirely different type of education. I'm kind of without the benefit of that. I've had to go back and teach myself because again, a lot of times I hear you guys talking, so on your podcast. So I'm sorry, I refer back to it, but you talk about employees and how someone's an employee and whether they're a friend or some people want to be too friendly and this and the other. I had to go and sort of get an understanding of what it is to be on the other side of me as an employer, right? Because I tended to be unproductive. Is really the way to do it, because even if you're trying to be nice or whatever, you still need to be productive and get a lot of value out of your employee and make them the best they can be, so that the company, the endeavor, the venture can be the best it can be. Sure. And it took me a long time to actually see that point of view. So there's a whole lot of things that I didn't get to see because I never had that perspective. that I had to go then teach myself to do. But yeah, I did not have a job. I did not get a job. I'm not sure I could have gotten a job.
You were unhireable.
That may have been the reason I didn't get a job. But I just went and started my own thing, and went on.
Yeah. So then, being an entrepreneur, I feel like is a lot different than being a business owner. So, I mean, what do you think the pros and cons are of each of those things?
Being an entrepreneur, you're sort of sitting there saying, okay, I want to do X, and I got to figure out how it's going to bring value to people, and how I can actually do the thing I want to do. And the way I went about doing that myself was I would start a venture, and then I would look at my competitors. The first thing I always do is you look at the market, right?
Right.
And so I'm looking at the market, I'm looking at my competitors, and I'm looking how the different obstacles that I have in running my own shop. And so I would identify things that I could box up that these, like, the same industry would need. What I call it is back officing. So the way I started most of my businesses was identifying needs that are in my business or in my industry, and then boxing that up and saying different things that my industry has trouble with, and boxing that up and doing it right, and doing it at a better price than the business does, and then marketing it to my competitors. So I would always start like this, and then start going kind of horizontally through my competitors and marketing to them, essentially. You mentioned what it is to be a business owner versus an entrepreneur. It can be the same thing, or it can be very different. Someone can go and buy a pizza shop just to have some sort of income and run a pizza shop. That I don't necessarily consider entrepreneurship. That I do consider owning a business, obviously. But identifying different needs and trying to solve them, and really, for me, doing it from scratch. Every business I started, I started from scratch, from 0 employees. And then trying to figure out how to bring value and how to expand that business, and keep on expanding it, keep on expanding the products, the services, and the value it brings. I think that's more entrepreneurship. I've never been asked that question either. Very good question.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I really, Ben, I see Ben's always solving problems in his businesses, right? Creating systems and processes, and, even like, coding his own apps to do the specific tasks that he, needs done. And so I think that's very fascinating to say, hey, like, you would solve a problem in your business, and then you would essentially box that up and then sell that to people who are in your same space of like, hey, do you need a solution to this problem? I mean, that seems like a great way to, like, I guess as an entrepreneur, if you have this desire to, see things come to life, it's like, hey, let me start, selling these things that I'm creating to people, and kind of see how they take off, how they go. But it seems like you'd be putting a lot of energy and, kind of taking a risk doing something like that. All right, we're going to pause this conversation here. Go to thefridayhabit.com. There you can find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. At the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit System that will show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of in your business. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear next week's episode, subscribe so you get notified. Also, leave us a review in Apple Podcast app or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to potentially be on one of our episodes with a question you ask us, go ahead and record a quick message in your phone, voice memo, and email it to hello@thefridayhabit.com. Until next time, live every day like it's Friday.